Okay. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited for this webinar. We're going to be focusing on future-proofing restaurant and bar operations with technology. My name is Scott Griffiths. I'm the Enterprise Executive for EMEA at Crunchtime, and I've had the pleasure of working with some of the largest and most well-known brands around the world to use technology to simplify and improve operations. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Chris and Vish from Whitbread. Whitbread is one of the UK's most recognisable hospitality operators, over 900 locations across UK, Ireland and Germany. And we're really excited today to talk to Chris and Vish about operations and about future-proofing them for further growth and further scale. So today's session is all about how leading pub and restaurant groups are rethinking their operational approach and the role that technology plays in making businesses more agile, more efficient, and more resilient in what is a very fast-paced and fast-moving industry. We'll be covering areas such as the current challenges facing the industry, how technology is helping groups drive margin, greater visibility and control, why Whitbread made the decision to partner with Crunchtime and how that partnership came about. And then we'll be running into a live Q&A where we can learn more about the real first-hand experiences from Chris and Vish and how Whitbread have got to where they are today, and then what their plans are for the future as well. So the next 45 minutes should be extremely jam-packed, but there'll be a lot of insights and a lot to take away. I will just start by giving a very short introduction to Crunchtime. So for those who are unfamiliar, you have a little bit of an overview of who Crunchtime are and what we do. So Crunchtime is a global leader in back-of-house technology, specifically designed for multi-location restaurant, bar, or hospitality operators. We've been in business now for about 25 years, and we have really 4 core technologies what focus on managing and optimizing back-of-house operations. We have our inventory platform, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, which is used by groups such as Whitbread, Cafe Nero, KFC. We have Zenput, which is our operations execution platform that helps groups maintain brand standards, maintain compliance as you scale, make sure you're abiding by health and safety, regulatory requirements. And that's used by groups such as RBI, Chipotle, and McDonald's. And then we have our e-learning platform and labor solution as well. Really, whether it's reducing food and drink costs or it's improving prep and production, it might be that customer reviews or operators are extremely busy. They don't have enough time to be front of house with guests. Crunchtime really is a technology vendor that powers all of your locations to operate like your best location. Today, Crunchtime is used in over 100,000 locations globally by global brands such as Shake Shack, Five Guys, and major franchise operators really across the globe. Where we specialize is really supporting complex and high volume operations, particularly multiple menus, multiple concepts that are really difficult to manage on legacy technology. And we find that as groups scale and grow, eventually what happens is a gap occurs between your best performing locations and your worst performing locations. And bridging that gap can really have a positive impact in the business. It can help improve COGS, it can reduce wastage, and then guest reviews and customer satisfaction scores go up as well. Just a quick overview on how the Whitbread and Crunchtime partnership came around. So back in 2024, what started as an upgrade to the existing technology stack quickly turned and snowballed into a real strategic transformation focused on food and beverage. When Whitbread began looking at ways to optimize and future-proof inventory management, a few clear drivers stood out, and these are reflective of the wider challenges really all across the sector that many groups are experiencing. Just to highlight a few, rising food and labour costs are putting significant pressure on organisations and margins. Fragmented systems and manual processes are slowing down teams. It's eating into operator time and reducing the amount of time they're spending with guests. And also the growing complexity of running a food and beverage operation, which is impacted by events, it's impacted by the weather, it's impacted by sporting activities which are going on in the area. So, it's these kind of things which are really creating an operational drag in groups of this size and scale. And Whitbread made the decision to partner with Crunchtime. We're going to be their single inventory platform across 900 plus locations. And really the goal is to simplify and consolidate operations, reduce waste, improve accuracy, and ultimately strengthen that profitability across the portfolio. I've spoken enough about Crunchtime. I'm super excited now to introduce Chris and Vish into the conversation. They'll be sharing more about Whitbread's journey. They'll give a little introduction on who Whitbread are as well. So Chris, Vish, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Scott. So I'm Chris Sei. I'm the head of brand and product here at Whitbread. So I've been with Whitbread for 4 years now. And I am responsible for defining our brand propositions and how we position those with our guests. And I've got a remit that spans the design of our kitchens and bars through to the menu development, through to how that is delivered operationally, right the way through to how we communicate our offering to our guests. I think it's important to say that because of the complexity involved in delivering these propositions, we also have a program management team which sits within my remit as well, which supports us through a stage and gate process, which is a process that has got over 200 different stages and clearly defined races and timings attached to each of those. My background is very much within the world of food. My career before Whitbread was within retail, so working for Marks and Spencer on the food development side of things and also the brand and marketing side. So I now hand over to Vish for a quick intro.
Yeah, so I'm Vish Samani. I'm the technical product manager for F&B Systems here at Whitbread. I currently look after all F&B systems that span our 900 plus locations. That is UK, Germany, and Austria. Really broad remit. Scott's probably touched on. We're going through a bit of a transformation in the F&B space at the moment in terms of upgrading all of our hardware and software. So really exciting times for us, but also kicking us into the 21st century, probably a little bit screaming at points. I've been in Whitbread for 17 years. The kind of first 11 years were in ops. So I was a general manager for just short of a decade. Moved into support centre role November 19, pre-COVID. Went through all of the trials and tribulations that COVID brought to the hospitality industry at the time as a systems manager, supporting with order and pay solutions, all of our reporting suites, looking after a booking platform for our branded restaurants. Spent a couple of years in IT business change and then moved into technical product manager role a couple of months ago. So new into role, lots of exciting stuff going on. First and foremost, this transformation into the world of Crunchtime and looking after a new inventory solution.
So a bit of an introduction then to Whitbread. When you mention the name Whitbread to many people in the UK, you often get the response, oh yeah, they're the brewers. And that was true if you go back 280 years when the business was first started by Samuel Whitbread. It was set up as a brewery. It's got a long history of innovating within the market. So introduced lots of different techniques in terms of the brewery, owned several 100 pubs across the country. But in its latter years, Whitbread actually sold the brewing arm of the business and has focused on where we are today, which is the Premier Inn Hotel Group. So Whitbread today is the largest hospitality business in the UK with over 38,000 employees. We are the owner of Premier Inn Hotels with a portfolio of 850 hotels in the UK, and we've got hotels in Germany as well, with an aspiration that we will become the #1 budget hotel. Now, as part of the portfolio of hotels, we also have a portfolio of restaurant brands as well. So just last year, Beefeater, the brand celebrated 50 years. So started back in 1974. But we've got a suite of brands that range from the value market with the likes of Brewers Fayre through to more the mid-market, Beefeater and Bar and Block. With all of our restaurants, they're all attached to a Premier Inn hotel. So not only is it serving the local communities, but also the hotel guests. So that's a bit of an overview as to who Whitbread are. I'm now going to hand back to Scott because I think we're going to go into some more in-depth questions.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, gents. That's incredibly helpful. I think, you know, as I think about the groups that I work with and even the conversations we've had with Whitbread over the last 18 months, the common theme I seem to hear is that the industry is changing and consumer expectations are shifting as well. So maybe if you can just touch on, you know, what you've seen in the industry change over your time at Whitbread and how Whitbread are kind of adapting to that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's continuous evolution of the hospitality industry. You're seeing new entrants coming in, changes in ownership. You've got brands that are leaving the market and also new brands being created. And I think the industry has really had to adapt to also many changing factors, whether that's the market dynamics post the pandemic, changes that are a result of changes in guest behavior, inflationary pressures, availability of labor, availability of food and drink, new government legislation coming in. I think it's really fair to say that we continue to very much operate in a VUCA world. So VUCA meaning volatile, uncertain, complex, with lots of ambiguity. So I think the ability for us to respond, adapt, and change is more important than ever. I think technology and investment in systems continue to support businesses in being agile and enable them to adapt through that change, whilst also driving efficiencies as well. And you know, it's very much front of mind. We've recently completed the rollout of a new hotel operating system across our business that unlocks a huge amount of potential for growth and efficiencies. And that was a huge project that was the best part of, I think, 12 months, just in terms of that rollout. But in terms of what that enables us to do, the opportunities are huge.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, just listening to that, I think resilience really is the key word here. But, you know, change is happening. Change does happen. There are influencing factors that are generally out of control, and resilience, but coupled up with an ambition and a eagerness to change and transform, I think is what is really positioning these industry leaders to where they are. So obviously Whitbread has had a diverse portfolio of brands. We're obviously speaking of Premier Inn, we're speaking about the different restaurant concepts. Where do you see Whitbread focusing your efforts in, say, the next 3 to 5 years?
So it's a really exciting time for us. We've got a very clear strategy and focus. In April of last year, we announced our accelerating growth plan, which will increase the number of hotel rooms that are available in the UK, whilst also at the same time optimizing our food and beverage offer. So we're currently in the process of converting over 100 restaurants whilst also selling a number of restaurants to build 3,500 new room extensions across the UK, so that we hit a target of 97,000 rooms by 2029. So we're well underway with that plan, and we're making really good progress against it. F&B remains integral to the guest experience. So even in those sites where we are selling a restaurant, we are building a new F&B provision within the actual hotel space. We've also got significant growth potential as well outside of the UK with our German business, and we're looking to expand that even further with new hotels opening, as well as opening new hotels, newly built hotels here in the UK. And we also continue to optimize our F&B with a focus on adapting our propositions to meet our guests' changing needs, and making sure that we're really delivering on those memorable moments for them, whether that's through the 23 million breakfasts that we serve up each year, or during their evening meal or milestone celebrations that they may be having in one of our restaurants.
I mean, that growth sounds super exciting. 97,000 rooms by 2029 is amazing to hear. You just touched on a really important point, which is, adapting and changing the F&B business, guests' ever-changing needs. And, one of the things what I think a lot of people are curious about is how is the traditional pub experience changing as consumer behaviors evolves? And, what do you think some of the most important shifts are, what operators need to respond to?
Yeah, so I think the pub market, you can separate it into many different segments, depending on the type of pub, the drink, the food offering, as well as the experience. And all of those different segments will have different customer profiles, and therefore those operators will tailor their propositions accordingly. But I think the main themes that you can really see coming through in that market, the first one will be around what I'd say is the traditionalist. So, there's been limited changes in that traditional pub experience. I'd say quality and range of drinks, that friendly service, the community spirit, all remain really important elements of that experience. It's that pub that you go to where you're a regular in there and the person behind the bar knows your name, knows your usual order. You've then got these more food-focused pubs. So we've seen continual growth of the emphasis on food. And I think that's really about driving that frequency of visit, but also making the pub more relevant. And at the same time, it gives you an opportunity then to increase spend. And we see lots of pub operators now, mainly within the independents, using the food offering to really differentiate themselves. So, for example, you've got the Devonshire pub in Piccadilly Circus, which has established itself as being famous for sort of homemade British food, and getting a table there at the minute is almost impossible. Of course, they've got a great selection of beers and drinks, but it's food first that it's become known for. And you're seeing lots of food-focused establishments. You're also seeing an element of specialism as well. Some pubs are choosing to specialize in certain types of drinks. So it might be they're known for their gins, or even, again, food. And again, it's about getting that recognition for that area of specialism. So, for example, you've got the Knave of Clubs in Shoreditch, which has recently reopened. It's kept all the elements of a traditional pub, but they've decided that they're going to be very single-minded in terms of their food proposition and specialise in rotisserie chicken. So it's a very small food menu. There's about 10 dishes on it, but it's very much rotisserie chicken is front and centre. Rotisserie chicken with a range of different sauces. You've got roast potatoes that are cooked in the chicken fat. And it is just about that specialist, unique experience, focusing on one thing done really well. You've also then got the pubs that are focusing more on experience. So we've seen that pubs and bars continue to broaden their offer to include more experiences such as bottomless brunch, theme nights, quizzes, games, etc. And again, that is all done to really, give a reason to visit and try and drive that frequency. I think it's important to recognise that value is still very important to customers. And that's where the price of a pint will really determine, the choice of venue for certain guests. We all know the success of Wetherspoons, which is all about the price of the alcohol, but it's then further enhanced with the food that's available as well, a really great price point. And they really use the food and the drink and that promotion of the value message to really drive that trade into their establishments. I'd say I've also seen that the choice of drinks continues to evolve. Drinks remain, important to the whole pub experience, of course, but attitudes towards drinks continues to change. If you went back sort of 5 or 6 years, gluten-free was quite a new thing within the drinks area. It's now pretty much a mainstay of any good pub. But we're seeing lots of growth in things like low and no alcohol options. And the really interesting thing there is that's really being driven by those younger customers. So to try and encourage them to visit your site, it's very much important that you've got a good, credible range there. And then obviously also the social presence. So social media continues to be really important in terms of driving that footfall, generating awareness, and also driving spend. Places like the Devonshire have become famous pretty much through their social media, but also the restaurant reviews. So having a really good sort of social plan is really critical in making sure today that your establishment is going to be successful.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think just to highlight, a few key areas there for groups to really excel, they need to find their niche, but they also need to have that kind of diversity where they are tapping into different guest and consumer habits. They are building up that familiarity with their guests. And, what we see from the vendor side is that becomes extremely difficult to manage. When you're trying to predict sales, you're trying to forecast your consumption, it makes it really, really challenging if you haven't got the right systems in place to try and do that and to try and get accurate. And that tends to result in, a lot of stock just sat on shelves, not being sold. It results in wastage happening because maybe they over-ordered and ordered too much. So that's certainly something what we're seeing from the vendor side as well. Just to, you brought up a good point around food and food starting to play a more prominent role where maybe some pubs in the past were purely wet-led sales, and food has now started to really creep into the mix and start to become quite a strong revenue point for the business. Some of the things we're hearing is that consumers are starting to now expect more complex and more varied menus. You mentioned gluten-free, but vegan, and then calorie-friendly children menus, things like that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your experience with Whitbread and kind of complexity of menus and menu adaptation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the guest is necessarily wanting a more complex menu, because I think you have to be really careful there that you could end up having huge big menus and the guest feels quite overwhelmed. I think what the guest is wanting though is they want their needs to be met by any sort of venue, and those needs are constantly changing. So again, it comes back to agility and our ability in order to respond to those needs. But also I think it's really important to see the bigger picture when considering those needs, because some needs might seem really small in terms of the size of the prize, but actually when you step back and look at it, actually the halo effect of that is huge. So what I mean by that is, if there's 4 people that are going out for dinner and one of those people are a celiac, where those 4 people go will be determined by that celiac and the provision of that establishment of their needs. So quickly you go from satisfying one person to actually satisfying an entire party of 4. So you have to step back and look at it in that context. And, you know, this is something we are very mindful of. I think for us, making sure that we've got the right tech to support delivering against those needs is hugely important. So, you know, simple things like that guest experience, that when they sit down, just because they have a different need to other people around the table, they're not presented with, you know, a folder of data. They've actually got a seamless experience in terms of accessing the information that they need to through a QR code on the menu that takes them through to all of the allergy data. Equally, at the front end, in terms of our planning, we use all of our systems to upload all of that product information so that when we're creating a dish, we can very quickly pull out, right, what are the allergens that feature in this dish? What are the things that we're going to need to communicate to the guest? And then obviously, with any sort of dishes that we launch on the menu, we are constantly looking at what that ordering pattern looks like, what the sales are looking like, to constantly monitor the performance and how it's being received by the guest. So I think it's about sort of being in touch with your guest, who they are and what their needs are and how those are changing, and then using what you've got around you in order to respond to that.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting and quite eye-opening way of looking at it, that by not meeting the requirement or need of one, you're actually missing the opportunity to serve 4, 5, 6+ guests. So it's incredibly important to know, you know, the menus, the allergens, all the nutritional information, what's going on behind the scenes. That really kind of leads me on to my next point, which is there is a ton of data, you know, behind all of these menus, all of these locations, what you have. And you know, many groups out there are trying to get better with data. They're trying to use the data to help and make more decisive actions. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, how you see data and the role that it plays in helping operators make better, more smarter decisions?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, data informs any business strategy. What I would say about Whitbread is we are very focused on data and what our data is telling us, as well as obviously gathering new data from talking to guests, etc. It's vital in terms of understanding, though, how the business performs, how the guest behaves, and also how we measure you know, whether our strategies are proving to be successful or not. So we take data from, you know, a huge range of sources, you know, starting with the guest, so the guest insight. So that comes through from our market research and our guest intercepts, but also through some of our loyalty data that we receive as well, looking at the bookings, uptake of breakfast, uptake of dinner when staying in our hotels. We also use market data as well to understand the broader market, how we're performing within that market, how our competitors are performing within that market. As I said, the loyalty data can really help unpick quite a lot of insight into the guest behavior, things like, you know, when they're celebrating milestone events, how frequently they're booking with us, which sites they're visiting. So there's a lot of information that we can gather from that. And then, of course, you know, the sales data that we receive from the performance of our food and our drink, but also helping us in terms of looking at the trended information and when do we see peaks and troughs in terms of sales. That helps informs our labor and helps us plan our labor, but also looking at our ordering patterns as well. So looking at our inventory systems to look at, okay, what sort of stock have we got around us? What's our forward forecast looking like? How can we plan to make sure that we're delivering what the guest needs and in line with sort of the trends that we've been seeing? So data, as I say, informs pretty much the majority of the decisions that we make on a daily basis, and it helps us drive efficiencies throughout our business as well. I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, I'd probably just echo what you said. It removes the guesswork and finger in the air element of an everyday operator. We use data-driven decisions. We'll ensure we're delivering a better product for our guests and ensure that full menu availability for everyone at all times. So really key principle to how we do things. And you've really touched on the labour elements of understanding our estimated booking levels that we're going to have, the number of guests we'll have in, forecasting labour in a far more coherent manner, and being able to give our guests a level of service they actually deserve when they walk through our business.
Absolutely. I think the importance of data is something that, no group out there can ignore. You need to be making decisions on the back of true and accurate data. And, some of the things that we hear, that a lot of groups have visibility on sales data or guest data, but really struggle with joining the dots to operations, to inventory, and then tying that through to, things like guest experience, speed of service. So often when I speak to QSR brands or, maybe more fast food chains, a lot of them can or have that information accessible. They seem to be a little bit more advanced than maybe some of the more kind of traditional pub or restaurant style organizations. So one of the things I am curious about is, what do you think is or has held pubs back, and maybe why have they been slightly slower to adopt technology than maybe some QSR or fast food style brands?
Yeah, I think the market dynamics and operating models are very different across the pub market. So I think it really depends on the operator, the guests that they're serving, and also their business strategy. Cost, of course, can be prohibitive, especially in the smaller sort of independents. And I think it's really important for the pub operators to really understand the benefits of the new technology and what efficiencies that can really deliver, and how it can be utilized, as well as those costs, so that they can balance up the investment versus the return. I think more establishments have adopted technology for front of house, as that's helped alleviate some of the challenges that have been driven by labour shortages. So order and pay at table is available in a lot of pubs today. But I also think, as I said before, it depends on the target guest, the site and location. Because if you're going to a traditional pub, part of that experience is the service that you receive, seeing that familiar face, having those interactions. So something like order and pay at table wouldn't be suitable technology for that sort of environment. Whereas if you were a younger guest that was going to a bustling bar at a weekend with a group of friends, it's all about socializing with the friends, and actually you want to get that drink as quickly and as easy as possible. So that's where that order and pay at table comes in and is super efficient, keeps everyone around the table, and is welcome there for the guest. So I don't think you can really apply a kind of one size fits all. It's about what's right for the individual business. I think the back of house technology has definitely been more embraced by the larger pub groups, as the benefits can be delivered at a much bigger scale. So things like new inventory systems have really supported, improved reporting, improved availability, reducing waste, and really helps those large operators to have more control of the costs and more access to the data that can help inform their decisions. Whereas in those smaller independent businesses, the benefits are likely to be outweighed by the associated cost of that investment.
That makes a lot of sense. And you just brought up a few kind of key areas that inventory systems can certainly solve for, which is making sure the right products are available and accessible, but also you're not sat on too much. So it's really about holding that optimal amount of stock. You don't want to be sat on weeks and weeks worth of stock where you have tied up capital, or you're maybe putting items at risk of wastage. And then if we think about
Sorry, just on that point, that's hugely important to us as a hotel business.
Yeah.
Because obviously, operating a hotel, you want as many bedrooms within the space as possible, which puts a lot of pressure in terms of the kitchen size and the storage facilities. So what you want to make sure is that you've got a system that supports you in having just enough stock to deliver the covers that you're going to need to within that time period, so that you can maximize the room potential in the space whilst also delivering a seamless F&B experience for the guest.
Absolutely. And we see all too often that this is left down to operators, managers. They are spending time in reports and looking at Excel and really using guesswork to try and work out what the forecast should be, how many daily sales or sales of certain items they're going to have on given days. And, you know, unfortunately, it is a real science, but you need to look through millions and millions of rows of data to try and predict that accuracy, which is really where systems, comprehensive systems, which have forecasting, come into it. Just on the topic of forecasting, I think this is really important, and this does play into what we just spoke about, which is the uniqueness of pubs and maybe some of the variables what they have compared to maybe QSRs and fast dining. But sporting events and you know, other type of events can have a huge impact on guest traffic. But they can also, you know, challenge an operation and, you know, having the right products and the right availability. What are your thoughts on how pubs can better prepare for these types of surges and, you know, really maximize on the opportunity?
So I think focusing in on those fundamentals is absolutely key. So the first bit is around being prepared and planning for success. And that's everything from sort of stock positions to labor. And it's looking at, right, okay, so when we've gone through some of these sporting events in the past, right, what were our ordering patterns? What was the uplift that we were seeing in terms of stock requirements, so that we can work with our suppliers to make sure that we've got enough stock around us, but also then looking at the sales patterns during those events as well, so we can understand what sort of labor do we need to put in place to support that. Because you need a robust plan and you do need to stick to it, but you need all of that information up front in order to create that plan. I think it's then about sort of how the operators then ensure that everyone within the team really understands that plan, their role within it. But the other element that's always critical is once you've delivered it, however it's gone, whether it's been a success or there's been some challenges, always having that moment to reflect back and say, right, okay, what could we have done differently? What do we need to change for next time? What are the learnings that we can take forward? I think it's also, as I said before, about understanding the opportunity as well and what levers you've got to maximize that opportunity. So again, looking back in terms of, you know, how you previously performed, but also how competitors have performed, what are some of the strategies that you can then put in place? So it might be that to support that sporting event, you put on a promotion to really drive trade into your venue, but you need to understand how that promotion is likely to perform. You need to make sure that you've got enough stock around you. So again, that's where the systems and data all really help in terms of informing that plan.
Just to build on that, I also think there's a technical piece that sits in the background of, do we have a technical solution and system that supports us to scale up and scale down? So a kind of standard trading pattern allowing for an operating model that really fits our business, whereas we go to really key sporting events where we'd want to switch order and pay on and do that in a really tactical, agile way. Do we have the technology in the background that supports us to be able to do that? I think that's really vital for us, because you don't want to have everything available to guests and team at all times. It should be something you can ramp up, ramp down as you actually do your business.
Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point, Vish, is being able to be agile, to switch on, switch off as and when you need to implement those certain things. You know, we just touched on kind of sales opportunities and increased footfall through sport events and being able to manage that. But, you know, cost pressures as well are continuing to rise, and businesses and groups are being impacted and hurt with these. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for cost savings for both pubs and restaurants in the future?
I think it depends on the operator, because all businesses operate in a very different way. But the thing is to understand what those costs are within your business. Do you really understand how much waste is driving within your business? Do you understand, how much product is being overordered, for example, how that's being managed back of house? Do you really understand your labor patterns and then your peaks and troughs in terms of your sales? So I think that has to be your starting point, making sure that you've got that information around you. And I think AI and technology is really supporting in terms of getting that data. So, for example, things like you can get these AI bins that will record the amount of waste that you're throwing away and the type of waste that you're throwing away in terms of food, so that you can then actually start to say, right, okay, this is where we need to focus our efforts on. So I think you start with the right systems to drive the efficiencies, to drive that data, and then it's interrogating that data that you've got to understand those key points.
And just to
absolutely, yeah. Sorry, please.
Just to build on the efficiency piece, I think we historically in hospitality have always concentrated on how do we reduce costs in our business, and we're at a bit of a pinch point now in a lot of hospitality businesses where there aren't enough people physically around. So how do we drive efficiency and optimize the team's ability to be able to deliver the best level of service to our guests, sell more, and therefore really drive value? So rather than thinking cost, I think more efficiency and optimization. And that's where technology will support us moving forwards.
I think a good example of that in our hotels, we've been trialing robot hoovers in terms of cleaning the bedrooms, which actually then frees up the team member to do other things, because they can turn the room a lot quicker, which means that the guests can get into their room quicker as well. So again, an example of where you can invest to unlock some longer term savings.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense, and we've heard that from other groups as well. I'm just conscious of time. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to finish with two questions. The first being, and I think this will be relevant to a lot of people on the call today, but for larger groups who are maybe running multiple concepts, how do you strike a balance between brand individuality and then operational consistency? Because I think that's some of the things that a lot of groups struggle with, is maintaining that brand image and individuality, but also, remaining consistent and adhering to what your values are as a group.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that, it's not a one size fits all. It has to be linked back to that target consumer and your market position. I think it's really important that any brand is really clear in terms of their reason for being, and that they're able to clearly articulate that and they stick to that. I think you have to be clever with what you have and adapt it to the different brand propositions. So I think there are cases where you do need to add complexity to differentiate, but if you're adding in complexity, I think you have to make sure that it's adding value to the guest. You can't just add it to differentiate. So, but again, you can be clever in terms of how you position some of those things. So, for example, we've got our double crunch chicken, which is a unique recipe for our coated chicken wings, which we developed specifically for our Beefeater brand. We don't just limit that ingredient though for our Beefeater restaurant, but we tell the story of the recipe, how it was created, why it's a Beefeater product. We use that ingredient elsewhere in some of our other brands, but it's just a coated chicken. So it's about how you use things in a clever way, and you can then benefit from the overall volume. You can drive a better price, and you keep your complexity down. So I think I would say my top tips there are, as I say, being really clear on what your brand stands for, and then really challenge yourself that if you're putting complexity in, is it adding value to the guest? Would the guest notice it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And then final question. I know we're at time, but we've obviously spoken a lot about technology and how technology can really position groups for success and really help ease those additional costs and detrimental costs which are happening to the business. But, you know, from your opinion, what do you think the most successful pub and restaurant groups will be doing differently in the next 12 to 24 months, maybe compared to today?
Okay, so I'll talk from a sort of strategic side, and then I'll get Vish to comment from a technical perspective. I think, as I said before, being focused and really clear in terms of what they stand for, but really keeping the guest at the heart of those decisions, making sure that they have got a point of difference within the market, and you know, as we've talked about a lot today, being agile and respond to the ever-changing needs of the guests without abandoning your sort of strategic plans. The foundations of that strategy need to be built around delivering that value for the guest, that great service, the great products, the great price. Because ultimately, any guest that you serve, you want them to leave you feeling happy and wanting to return back again. So it's that agility and ability to adapt and change.
Yeah, so completely agree with everything you've said. I think there's keeping a really close eye on what's going on from a legislative perspective. So how do we tie that in and ensure the proposition still stacks up and it's a great experience? And building on the experience element, I think there's a huge drive on ensuring that our dining experiences are great experiential kind of locational stays that people want to go and return to time and time again. It's great getting someone in the door once. How do we get them in on a repeat basis? And to deliver a great experience, we have to have technology in the background that allows the team to be more efficient, so we can concentrate fully on that experience for the guests. So for me, it's using technology to really leverage in the background so we can deliver the best experience for our guests while keeping a really close eye on the ever-changing marketplace that we're in.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Chris, Vish, I want to just say a quick thank you from Crunchtime, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to join today. I hope today's been insightful. Obviously, we will share the recording afterwards, so you can view it if you maybe didn't get a chance to catch it all. But yeah, once again, thank you, and we look forward to speaking soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.